This video is presented to you by Neurospace, a company which is building the next generation of moon rovers and wants to take the opportunity to look back into the history of previous Moon and Mars rovers. It is a story full of pioneering spirit, exploration and engineering miracles. Welcome to the video series, The History of Extraterrestrial Rovers. This episode is about the first bold steps to send a robotic ambassador of humanity out there into the unknown. The Americans were indeed the first to land humans on the moon, but the Soviets were the first to send a satellite into orbit with Sputnik in 1957, the first to send a human into orbit with Yuri Gagarin in 1961, the first to do an extravehicular activity with Alexei Leonov in 1965, the first to softly land an unmanned probe on the moon with Luna 9 in 1966, and also the first to drive a rover on an extraterrestrial body. 4 men had already walked on the moon, and NASA was recovering from the Apollo 13 drama when the spacecraft Luna 17 with the rover Lunokhod 1 on board landed in the western part of the Mare Imbrium on the moon in November of 1970.
Although the rover was on the moon only after the first humans, it was nevertheless an essential step in exploration of the solar system. In the future, humans will have to live and work together with robotic systems like a Neurospace rover, because only robots can work efficiently in the harsh environment of space.
The confident Soviets didn't start small at all. With a weight of about 750 kilograms, it came close to the famous and most modern Mars rover Perseverance. Lunokhod, which is Russian for moonwalker, might look more like the unathletic and shy older brother of Perseverance, but appearances are deceptive. It had a quite remarkable technology under its belt. It survived for 11 lunar days, which is 322 Earth days, and traveled 10.5 kilometers in that time. Still, the second longest distance an unmanned moon rover has traveled. Unlike any other future rover design, it had 8 wheels. After a painstaking design and testing process, the wheels were made out of rigid spokes, metal mesh and metal cleats for traction, with a diameter of about 510 mm and a width of 200 mm. Pairs of wheels were suspended to ensure all wheels have surface contact in uneven terrain. Turning was achieved by varying the wheel's speed and direction of rotation. Every wheel had its own motor and gear, including brakes, and a mechanism to disconnect the motor and let the wheel rotate freely should the motor or gear have a malfunction. Each wheel could also be explosively jettisoned in case something prevented its rotation. Sensors measured motor temperature and counted wheel revolutions. To be able to determine the traveled distance and the amount of wheel slippage, the revolutions of a 9th free-rolling wheel at the back were also measured. Lunokhod got its energy from solar cells, which were mounted on the underside of a huge lid. During the lunar day, the lid was opened to generate electricity and charge the chemical batteries. The rover operated with a nominal voltage of 27 volts and had an incredible low power consumption of 180 watts. A second reason to open the lid at daytime was to reveal the thermal radiators beneath, which had a highly polished surface to minimize absorption of sunlight while still being able to radiate excess heat into the 3 Kelvin background of space. During the long and cold lunar night, the lid was closed to prevent heat loss through thermal radiation, which is the only way of heat transfer in a vacuum. A heat source consisting of radioactive decaying polonium-210 with a half-life of 138 days kept the rover warm. A gaseous mixture with a pressure of about 1 bar inside the airtight instrument compartment, made out of a magnesium alloy, was used to transfer heat with the help of fans and baffles. The gas flow was diverted towards the nuclear heater during the night and towards the radiator during the day. Although the outside of Lunokhod 1 had a temperature of more than 100 degrees Celsius on day 4 of its operation, the interior stayed within the required range of 10 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius.
Unlike the Lunokhod rover, which had an active thermal control system, our rover, which is only the size of a nanosatellite, simply lacks the space and energy for such a system.
The rover was operated by a crew consisting of 5 members: crew chief, driver, navigator, antenna operator and engineer. There were 2 crews who always alternated. The members were between 28 and 34 years old, and they are claimed to have received the equivalent of cosmonaut training for over 2 years prior to the Luna 17 launch. There were 2 speeds with which the rover could travel. The first speed was 0.93 km per hour. The second one was double this speed, but the latter was not used very frequently. An autonomous system assisted the crew by stopping the rover automatically when its pitch or roll angle surpassed a certain threshold. In order to steer Lunokhod properly, there were 2 camera systems installed. The first was a narrow-band television system consisting of 2 cameras mounted at the front. They were used to see where the rover is going. They had a frame rate of only 1 frame per 3 to 20 seconds, but this was enough considering the slow change in position. The second camera system consisted of 2 telephotometer cameras on each side of the rover. Their images were used to evaluate terrain and slope angles and also to navigate. By picking up Earth and the Sun simultaneously in an image, the scientists could derive the bearing of the rover. In combining this technique with an onboard gyroscope, the team was able to navigate very accurately over the Moon's surface. Lunokhod had an X-ray fluorescence spectrometer called RIFMA on board, which shot charged particles onto the soil and could determine which elements were present in the target by measuring the X-ray emission spectrum. The bearing strength of the lunar soil was measured by driving a penetrometer into the soil every 15 to 30 meters. The strength was derived from the torque needed to rotate the penetrometer at different depths. The rover also provided a laser reflector, similar to the Apollo reflectors, for measuring the Earth-Moon distance very precisely. 322 days into the mission, way longer than the expected lifetime of 90 days, Lunokhod stopped working because the heat energy of the polonium-210 fell below the required limit. After this big success, the Soviet Union, of course, planned a second rover. And so in 1973, Lunokhod 2 landed on board the probe Luna 21, only 180 kilometers north of the Apollo 17 landing site in the Le Monnier crater. It was basically the same rover as Lunokhod 1, but had a few improvements. Through placing a third front camera at the height of human eyes, the operators had more confidence in steering the rover. All in all, the increased experience of the crew gained from Lunokhod 1 led to longer continuous drives, faster speeds and more efficient turnings of the rover while moving. This made it possible to almost triple the average speed. They broke the distance record of Lunokhod 1 by 28.5 kilometers, although the rover was operational 86 days less. With a traveled distance of 39 kilometers, Lunokhod 2 held the record for the longest distance a rover has driven on an extraterrestrial surface for 41 years, until Mars rover Opportunity broke that record. But it is still the longest distance a rover has ever traveled on the Moon. And it took 40 years before another rover finally drove on the Moon again. It was U-21 by the Chinese. A fun fact for the end of this video: the Lunokhod 2 rover as well as the Luna 21 lander were bought by Richard Garriott, the 6th space tourist and son of NASA astronaut Owen Garriott, for $68,500 at an auction in New York in 1993. So maybe once the commercial space age starts to develop its full potential, Lunokhod 2 might be brought back to Earth for a museum or even used for a museum on the Moon itself.